tips for making, you know, all the different steps from contract to closing. So hopefully he can get the PowerPoint up kind of soon. So you get the contract executed, or you know, an executed contract, and next time you see your clients is at the closing table, right? No. So there's so many things that as an agent you want to stay on top of even once you have that that contract executed and agreed upon between buyers and sellers. One of the first things that you want to make sure that you're doing is calculating out all of the important contract dates. So what are some of those important contract dates? Okay. One, it looks like we're maybe having a little technical difficulty. So anyways, all of the contract deadline dates are you know, counted out from the effective date, right? So you first want, as an agent, to make sure that you understand what the difference is between an executed date and the effective date. Executed date is definitely when the date the last party actually signed. That doesn't necessarily mean that that is your actual effective date. The effective date means that the executed contract has been sent over and delivered to all parties. So if, by chance, maybe the last person signed at like 11 p.m. And you didn't deliver it until the next day, then the effective date actually isn't going to match the date, you know, the executed date is going to be the next date. So you want to keep that in mind when you're, you know, when you're making your effective date. Then from there, once you know what your effective date is, dates that you want to keep track of are, you know, the buyer's escrow due date, when the buyer's loan application is due to be submitted, when your inspection period ends, if there's a condo association or homeowners association that has an approval process, you want to make sure that you're, you know, calculating the date out for the, you know, application to be submitted. You want to make sure that you're calculating out the date for the loan approval, and then also, obviously, you want to make sure that you keep track of your actual closing date. So in calculating these dates, you also want to make sure that you know how to properly count and calculate all of these due dates. For the as-is contract, you have to include every single calendar date in your count, all right? So that means when you're counting, you count Saturdays and Sundays and holidays in your actual count. Page 8 of the contract specifies time, and it specifies that if a deadline date lands on a Saturday and Sunday or holiday, it will automatically roll over to the next business day. All right. So with an as-is contract, no deadline dates can actually end on a holiday or Saturday or Sunday, but you do count those dates when you're in your count. Does that make sense to everyone? So okay.
Sorry, let me repeat. So if the deadline lands on a weekend, automatically we have to, like, for that money.
Right. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So once you have all of your dates calculated out, it is extremely important to communicate those to all of the parties involved, right? And you want to make sure that you're communicating to all of the parties, you know, at the very beginning. That way, if for some reason, you know, maybe the other agent doesn't agree with your effective date, then you can like hit that off and come to an agreement at the at the beginning, instead of like maybe you think the inspection ends on Tuesday and they think it ends on Wednesday, and then you have a little conflict. So you want to make sure that you're communicating to all parties. You want to so that means, thank you. Okay, so we talked about that, and we talked about that one, and we talked about that. So Yes. All right. So here, this is slide that we're on. So you want to make sure that you're, communicating with all parties. That includes your buyer or seller, your cooperator, the other agent, and the title company and the lender. You want to make sure that the lender is definitely aware and highlight the date that the buyer is to submit their, actually complete all of the official loan applications. And also, of course, the loan due date. So, and you want to send those out like in an email or whatever. I also highly recommend that you put those dates in whatever calendar system that you use. And so that you are aware, and set yourself reminders, maybe the day before the loan period ends or the loan approval is due. You get a little alert. Oh yeah, Susie's loan approval is due tomorrow. Maybe I should make sure that we're on track to get that and get that approval letter. Or if the lender says, no, we're not going to have it tomorrow, make sure that you're doing, an extension addendum to keep yourself compliant with or your buyer compliant and then within the constraints of the contract. Or if any of this seems a little overwhelming and confusing, you can always hire someone from Dynamic Closings to be your coordinator to take care of calculating all of your dates and communicating all of your dates to all the parties involved. Okay, so we have all of our dates. Obviously, one of the first things that the buyer needs to do is submit their escrow deposit. An escrow deposit can be made as a personal check, or a wire transfer to the escrow agent. As the selling agent, aka buyer's agent, you want to make sure that it's really your responsibility to make sure that the buyer has submitted those funds on time, and you also want to make sure that you get the official escrow letter from the escrow agent by the due date. You want to make sure that you're sending that escrow letter, deposit confirmation to all the parties involved. The lender needs a copy of that. The cooperating agent needs a copy of that. Send it to make sure your buyer has a copy for their records. The other things that you want to make sure that you're doing is protecting your buyers and sellers from against wire fraud. It's a big thing now, right? It's like really not a joke. It really happens, and agents can actually be held liable for if their clients send a wire to a fraudulent account. So before your buyer makes a wire transfer for their escrow deposit, make sure that you're communicating to them and warning them about wire fraud. So let's talk a little bit more about the wire fraud. I would extremely highly recommend that as an agent, you make it your policy to never send wire instructions to your buyers and sellers. Request from the escrow agent, the title company, the law firm, or whoever is holding escrow, that they send those instructions to the buyer directly. They can copy you on that email so that you can see that it's been sent, but that it's not coming to you or from you. You want to make sure that you're communicating and warning your buyers about and sellers about wire fraud. Make sure that they understand that if that is going to be your policy, that you're never going to send them, that you're communicating that to them. Listen, throughout this transaction, you will never get wire instructions from me as your agent or from your lender. Wire instructions will come directly from the closing team. All right. If you happen to get an email from me that says that it's wire instructions attached and make this deposit or make this transfer these funds now, make sure you are don't open that link, don't open that attachment. Inform me that you got an email that looks like it came from me. Pick up the phone, call me, ask me about it if you think that it's fishy. Because the last thing you want is for your buyer's funds to go to the wrong account and then them turn around and try to sue you for it. All right. Sure.
Give us like a concrete thing because this is all like theory, and I was like confronted with something and like, so do you have an address where we send this? Like, what do I tell? Let's say I have my buyer now and he wants to sign. What do I do? So I mean, he signs a contract and then.
This is, so right now we're talking about wire fraud with when they make that, as you already have, so you already have a executed contract. This is more in regards to like when your buyer is getting ready to make their escrow deposit, or later in the.
Like, where do we, what do we send him? I wouldn't know what to tell my client.
So you want, as the agent, you want to communicate to your client, this is when, per our contract that we have agreed upon, your escrow deposit is due on this date. And and then you're going to inform them that you will not email them the wire instructions to make that deposit. That email will come from the whatever selected closing agent. The Oh, yeah. If you want to get in contact with me, yes, we have. You can do location at Dynamic Closings. You can do faith at Dynamic Closings. Yeah, we've got definitely. I'm sorry, I was not. I thought you were like asking like an email for wire fraud or something, because that's what we were talking about. So yes. Sure. Sure. So, yeah, no problem. So she was asking how to get in contact with us. And we have a slide later that actually has all of our contact information. Can you turn that off, please? Sorry. So anyways, sorry, I got a little confused there. It happens to the best of us, right? So it's just, wire fraud is a real thing, and it's been like increasingly getting worse and worse, and hackers and people that are trying to steal money are getting better and better at ways to do it. And so I'm not trying to like harp on this, but it's just really something that's really very important that I feel a lot of times people kind of brush off. You know, those wire fraud prevention notices that we're supposed to have all clients, you know, people kind of just brush those off. Don't brush them off, man, because you guys really can, like, if something happens to your client, you guys can get in trouble. We can get in trouble for it, and we don't want that. So, you know, take a class to inform yourself. There's, you know, lots of different attorneys' offices and lots of different security people will teach classes on wire fraud. So better educate yourself on those things. I will make sure that next time I see one, that the last one that I took from it was like a security person. The next time they teach a class, I'll make sure to post it on the location, because it's a good class. So we are through. We've got the escrow deposit done. And actually, a lot of these things you don't want to like, okay, it's not like step one, do this, and then this. A lot of these things are all going on at the same time. So you're informing your buyer to make their escrow deposit. They're making their escrow deposit. Now you're helping them set up the inspection, right? So for the inspection, I see a lot of deals fall apart during the inspection period. And I think that a lot of that falls on us as agents, as not really properly communicating with our buyers and sellers as to expectations and the purpose of the inspection, all right? The inspection is to really check for major structural items, right? It's not for cosmetic items. When you have a as is contract, you know, obviously they're not going to change the paint on the seller's not going to change the paint on the walls, or necessarily change a carpet because it's stained. Those are cosmetic things. All right. So you want to really, instill in your buyers, if as a selling agent, the purpose of this is to make sure that, it's a sound foundation, that, there's not any unknown roof issues, that there's, the property doesn't have, polybutane pipes that, aren't insurable. There's no major plumbing issues. There's no major electrical issues. But it's really not to nitpick, cosmetic type of items. You also want to let them know it is the inspector's job to point out all of the little nitpicky type things. But once we get that report from, your inspector, we're going to sit down and look at it, and we're really going to focus on the things that, could be major structural, major cost, items. So if you set your buyer up to know that, remember, this isn't as is contract. Remember, the seller really doesn't have to do anything regardless of what the inspection results, show. And, number 3, we are really trying to focus on, major structural items. Remember how when you walked into this house and you were viewing it, how you loved it, that's not going to go away. We just want to make sure that that the roof doesn't have, an unseen major hole in it, So if you set up your buyers with realistic expectations, a lot of times the inspection period goes well. Then they're not like looking at all the little itty bitty, nitpicky items that all inspectors point out. You also want to make sure that you're encouraging your buyers and helping your buyers schedule the inspection early enough on that if some of those bigger items show up, say, polybutane pipes were found, you can get a professional out there to give a more realistic quote for that type of repair. Or it also gives you more time to kind of go back and forth with negotiations from some of those bigger items that could be found. It's also, very important that once you get that report, to actually sit down or at least over the phone, go over those items in that report with your buyer, because sometimes they might be kind of focused on something that's really not a big deal, and you as a knowledgeable agent might be able to kind of explain to them that's more of a cosmetic issue. Or they might not be aware of something that could be a big issue that could cause problems with getting insurance that maybe you might want to advise them of. Like, hey, maybe we do want to ask the seller to replace this electrical box because, that's not, we're going to have a little bit of issue when we get further down and you're trying to get insurance, because insurance isn't going to cover this type of electrical box. So, make sure that communication is always key. Setting up realistic expectations is, key, and making sure that you're, helping your client schedule with enough time to really make a sound decision, and to help give enough time to do any negotiations. The other thing that I see a lot of agents doing is they don't attend these inspections. The more face time you have with your clients, the more they feel like you really care, and that you're really there to support them, and you're really there to on their behalf, and to helping them. So if your buyer is going to attend this inspection, you should go. You should go and be there. If your buyer, I would encourage, even if your buyer is not planning on going, to at least go to the tail end of it, towards the end, and go over the, inspection findings with the inspector on behalf of your buyer. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can help communicate that, to your buyer, since they weren't there. The more, again, the more time you can be with your client, really the better.
can I ask you another question?
Sure.
What do you consider a reasonable time? How, like, when should we start doing that? How long does it take?
The inspection? I would encourage starting to schedule the inspection like the day the day or the day after you have the contract executed and effective. I mean, immediately. You want to immediately start scheduling that and try to get that done as quickly as possible. On the contract, if you don't put a time frame in, it's an automatic 15 days. I don't see very many contracts that give the full 15 days. I see more typically in between 7 and 10 days. 7 days sounds like a lot, but it's really not.
So it's the buyer who chooses who he's going to take as a company, or
Ultimately, yes. Yes, it is up to the buyer. A lot of times, buyers don't companies, so it's always good as an agent to have a few inspectors that you've worked with that you trust. It's also good to when you refer these, if you're giving referrals for inspection companies, to make sure that they're companies that your past buyers have given you good feedback on. So, and tell them, this is inspector that's done, inspections for a few of my previous, clients. And, I got some really good feedback from those clients on these inspectors. If you're a new agent, reach out to other agents, post on the Facebook, Lokation Facebook app, who do you use as an inspector in this area? And get some recommendations. Yeah, sure.
We here at Lokation Real Estate have a couple of people that help agents. They get more agents all the time.
I'm sorry. So you said here at Lokation you have people here for agents.
That employees that are here just specifically to help agents.
Locations has agent services. Yes. Yes. So that would be an agent service. Their agent services person at Lokation would be a good resource for asking for, recommendations as well. All right. So when it comes to inspections as the listing agent, some of the stuff is kind of the same. You want to communicate and set up realistic expectations with your sellers. All right. A lot of times sellers think this is an as-is contract and I'm not doing nothing. Well, okay, Mr. Seller, that's great, but we just found out that there is a huge roof leak, and unless you're going to accept, cash only deals, people aren't going to be able to get, insurance at a reasonable rate. So you just knocked yourself out of, being a huge market of other potential buyers. So you want to let them know that yes, even though this is an as-is contract, it is normal in real estate after the inspection for the buyer to come back with a few requests. Let's be willing to look at those requests. We don't necessarily have to honor all of the requests or give them the full credit that they've asked for, but let's be willing to look at the report and think, and reply in a reasonable manner. So a lot of times, just communicating and setting up expectations helps, get through that. You also want to make sure that, especially if the property is occupied, that, the sellers realize that they have to open the door and they have to grant access, to, for these inspections. So you want to make sure that when the buyer requests a time, that you try your best to get your seller to accommodate that time. If it's vacant, you also have to make sure that your seller is aware that it is their responsibility to have all of the utilities on for inspection, appraisal, and final walkthrough. Okay, so if the property, if the seller has moved out and turned off the electric and now you're under contract, you want to make sure that they know that they do have to, turn that electric back on. Again, just like as the buyer's agent, as a selling agent, as the listing agent, you want to make sure that if your seller is adamant about attending the inspection, you are there as well. Okay. Any kind of other questions? We kind of talked about inspections. Is there like questions coming in from a Facebook thing? No, I don't know. Okay.
I do have a question. So
Sure.
Is contract, as where I'm understanding, they're not obligated. You can use that as a negotiation with things that come up with the inspection, correct?
Okay, so you said with the as-is contract, they're not obligated.
If they don't want to do the repairs. Like
Oh, right.
Example.
The seller, yes, they can decline the request for a repair. So the question,
No, I meant about
yeah. So you're asking the seller, is the seller obligated to do repair based on the buyer's requests from the inspection result?
What I'm understanding of what you just explained, we're going to use that inspection report to negotiate, but they're not obligated. Is there any item that can, they need like a mold issue or like you said, the roof? Is that something that is only if they're willing, as is contract, they're not responsible, not even for mold? That's my question.
Okay, so that depends. So the question is there any repairs that a seller would be obligated contractually to repair, right? With an as-is contract. Yes and no. It depends on what kind of loan the buyer is getting. Okay. With a VA loan, the property has to have a clear WDO report. That's a loan requirement. So, and as part of that FHA VA addendum that's included, that the seller signs, they agree that they will have the property free of termites. So if that comes up in the inspection and it's a VA loan, then they have to fix that. A clear wood destroying organism, termite. WDO, wood destroying organism. I'm trying in another circumstance where as far as the buyer's inspection, that the seller's not necessarily obligated. Now, when it comes to the appraisal, if the appraisal notes to meet this market value, to meet this value, and it notes repairs that have to be done, then yes, that is the seller's obligation and requirement. Now, it is my understanding that if the seller doesn't do that and the contract doesn't close because they can't clear the loan, and then the buyers due back their escrow. So I mean, I guess ultimately the seller could still say no, I'm not going to do it, even if the appraisal has repairs noted on it, but then the deal won't close. So I mean, but as far as like the actual buyer's inspection report, no, the seller is not obligated to have to do any of those requested items or any of those repairs. They can, cancel contract, they can decline the buyer's requests, and then if the buyer decides to cancel, before the end of inspection period, they can. Or the buyer can say, well, I guess I'll suck it up and do it after. Okay. The electrical panel, yes. Okay, so our question is, on an FHA loan with an outdated electrical panel, is that whose responsibility? To my knowledge, there's nothing on the FHA addendum that says that the seller has to repair or replace that electrical panel. So it would be, I mean, the buyer, if the seller refuses to do it prior to closing, then the buyer would have to do it after closing. The buyer probably could not get home insurance to clear the loan, which couldn't get mortgage. Correct. Yes. Yes. But that doesn't mean that the seller is obligated to have to do the repair. I'm sorry? So in the special notes, okay, so in the special notes, that's before you've probably done your inspection, right? Okay. You can, but that would be during the negotiations, you know, at the beginning before you have an effective executed contract. So yeah, I mean, you can do those type things. Note, any repair items that you put on page 11 will become contingencies, and you will have to provide proof that that has been done by a licensed and insured electrician. It's been permitted, and all of that proof has to be sent to the lender in order to clear the loan. So any repair items that are put on page 11 in the, you know, that are agreed upon before, you know, during the original negotiations, will become loan contingencies. All right. Yes. Yes. So very good point. We can add an addendum. Next slide. Actually, 2 slides later. So talking about addendums. So we did the inspection, and buyer and sellers did agree to, you know, buyer agreed to maybe not get all of the repairs that they want or the biggest, you know, credit amount that they want. Seller agreed to give in a little bit and do a couple repairs or to give a small credit. When writing addendums, here's a few tips, all right? All the negotiated things during the inspection report or inspection period or due to the inspection do not have to be on one addendum, okay? I would highly, highly recommend that you keep credits and repairs separate, okay? Credit addendums, I would highly recommend that you do not use the verbiage that the credit is for a repair. If it's a cash deal, I guess you can put whatever you want. If it's a finance deal, as soon as you write the word repair and you send that credit addendum to the lender is going to want to know what needs to be repaired, and then those repairs become loan contingencies to clear the loan, okay? And to be able to find it, you know, have funding happen. So I would also make sure when you're doing repair addendums that you're extremely specific in your wording, okay? I would even add that the page on the inspection report that the repair was noted. Like the seller specifically agreed to fix this, you know, this item from this inspection report. Because I have had multiple times where, you know, the repair addendum is very vague and the buyer is expecting, you know, one thing, like, we're going to fix the roof. Okay, that's the agreed upon repair, is the roof is going to be fixed. So the buyer has in their mind, we're going to get a new roof, right? And it's going to be a new roof at closing. And the seller's thinking, I'm just going to fix those few cracked tiles and a little flashing here and, you know, just patch it up. And they get the final through and the buyer's like, this is not what we agreed upon. So just make sure that in your credit, in your repair addendums, that you're extremely specific in your wording as to what the seller is going to do, and, you know, and again, like I said, it's very wise to use the inspection report and itemize, with that itemized repair list, and point out like the page of the inspection report or the item number from the inspection report. Know that your lender does not need a copy. A lender does not need a copy of the general inspection report, and they do not need a copy of repair addendums. Okay. They do, however, need a copy of those credit addendums, and so does the closing team when they're, I'm sorry. So if all of this seems a little overwhelming, you can also leverage one of your resources, which is dynamic closings, and we can help schedule the inspection for you, and we can help you review over the inspection report as the agent, and point out items to you as the agent that could be problems further down. And then once an agreement has been made, we can also make sure that we write the addendums for you, get the addendums executed, and make sure that they're sent to all needing parties. We'll get to that later. She asked how much we charge, and we will get to that later. Any other questions about kind of the inspection addendums, stuff like that? Okay. This is one of the biggest hurdles, though, when it comes to getting through to the closing. So sometimes we have these lovely things that are HOAs, COAs, and they're fun, right? Management companies are fun to deal with. Yes. So if you have a property that is in an association, as the listing agent, you want to make sure that you're obviously disclosing that the property is in a association. It's also, you want to make sure that you're providing the buyer's agent and the title company and all parties of the correct association contact information. Your seller should know that. Obviously, sometimes we have these, estate deals where maybe the person didn't actually live, and they inherited the property. So maybe those are circumstances where they won't know, contact information for the association. But if they've lived in the place, even if it was an investment property, and they've had tenants in it and stuff, they should know who the contact is for the association. You want to find out if there's an approval process required for a buyer. If it's a condo association, as the listing agent, you need to make sure that your seller is aware that it is the seller's responsibility at the seller's cost or expense to provide the buyer with all of the governing documents. Okay, governing documents are more than just the list of rules and regulations. It's their whole declaration of, now my mind's going blank. It's a big book. No, it's so the Declaration of Incorporation, all the financials is also something that is required for them to provide. So you also want to take note as the listing agent, especially as the listing agent, but also as the buyer's agent, that once those governing documents are given to the buyer actually has 3 days to review those and cancel. So that means, like, if your seller doesn't give the buyer those actual governing documents until like the day before closing, the buyer actually has the right to take those 3 days to review those. And then if they don't really agree with maybe some of the rules or something in those documents, they could cancel. So, make sure that you're, getting those documents from the seller. As a listing agent, it would be really best to get those even, from the seller before even putting it active on the MLS, or at least confirming that the seller has them before them. So any questions about that, about governing documents? I thought so. Go ahead. on the contract.
You are describing the HOA, you know, I
Mhm.
don't remember right now what page it is. You have many options. You have homeowner association, condominium right, or many others. Which one you know that you have to select, or condominium right, or association, homeowner association? What is the difference in those
There,
checklists?
yeah, there are some differences because a condo association it is a lot different than a homeowner association. So the question was, how do you know which addendum or disclosure to use, whether you use a homeowners association or a condominium association? And that the way you know that is you have to confirm what type of association that it is, that the property is in. Because I know sometimes it does get a little confusing, especially with townhomes and villas. Is this a homeowners association, or is this governed as a condominium association? Call the management company, call the property manager, and find out, is this a homeowners association, or is this a condominium association? A lot of times as the association, one of the big differences in those is what the association is responsible for. Yes.
Just for an info, it's very important sometimes to talk about that, because I had a townhome in Orlando,
Mhm.
which it wasn't, supposed it was not a condo, it should be registered as, you know, there were townhomes. But they were registered under condominium.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it makes a difference when you, for the loan.
So she's saying that she had a property up in Orlando that that she thought was it was a townhome or a villa, and she thought it was a homeowners, but the association was actually registered as a condo. Get the governing documents. The governing documents will actually specify what type of association they are incorporated as. The articles of incorporation is part of the governing documents. That was what I couldn't think of, the word I couldn't think of a minute ago. So any other questions about that? Yes.
So when you receive the documents, you sign off on it, is that counted as 1 day for the 3 days? Or is it the following?
The day they're received
So if you
is,
receive them at 5 p.m., it's still counting as a day.
yeah, they have 3 days from that day. Yes. I'm sorry. So he's asking, once the buyer confirms receipt of the governing documents, how does, where does that, the day count? So yes, it would be kind of like effective date in counting. Okay. So you also, as the, uh-oh, now it's not working. Okay, anyways, so you also, as the buyer's agent, you want to make sure that the buyer is, submitting the application on time and full. You want to follow up with the management company and make sure that they are getting their approval in time for closing. You also want to make sure that they know that the title company will need a copy or need the actual original approval letter. So make sure that when they come to closing, your buyer has their original approval letter. Okay. So moving on. Ooh. Financing. So I think we're kind of running out of time. I've gone kind of in more detail on things. So anyways, so financing, obviously this is a huge part of the transaction, all right? Stay in communication with the lender, all right? Like every couple days, just text your lender, or email the lender, or call the lender. Just want to make sure, things are going well. But ask specific questions. Don't just say, hey, are we doing good? Are we going to, close on time? Like ask them, hey, have you gotten all the loan, initial loan disclosures signed yet? Hey, have you submitted the title request to the title company? Hey, have you gotten the authorization to order the appraisal? Oh, you got that authorization? Have you ordered the appraisal yet? Great. Oh, has the file been reviewed by underwriter? What additional documents did the underwriter need from the buyer? Have you gotten those yet? You know, so like make sure that you're asking specific questions. Just saying, hey, how are we doing? Is the file going okay? Every lender is going to tell you, yep, it's going great, and we are on track. Then when you start digging in, you're going to find out, oh, they're still pending this, still needing that. So, you know, make sure that you are staying in constant communication and asking specific questions. A lot of times a lender will ask for additional addendums, like such as we need to add a middle name for the buyer. Make sure that any of those those are the agent's responsibility to get done, not the buyer's responsibility. So make sure that you're getting those done, executed, and returned to your lender quickly. So you also want to stay in touch with TRID guidelines, because the CD has to be sent out and acknowledged. Just because the lender sends you an email and says, hey, send out the CD went out today, reply back with, great, did the buyer acknowledge it? Because if they sent it out and the buyer didn't actually acknowledge it, that doesn't count. The buyer has to acknowledge for the 3-day hold to start. I refer to this all the time. But this might also be a date that you might want to mark in your calendar or put in your calendar as a due date to keep track of, because can't close without this 3-day hold. Any questions about the 3-day TRID hold? Okay. So when it comes to like the listing agent's responsibilities, as far as like the buyer's loan, it's also your responsibility to stay in communication with the lender as well, because what's your seller going to be doing? Your seller is going to be asking you questions, right, about how the buyer's loan process is going. So it is totally acceptable and highly recommended that even as the listing agent, you are staying in contact with the lender. You also want to make sure that your seller understands that they have to grant access to the appraiser. So that is another appointment that they have to open up their home for. And you also have to make sure that they understand that they have to have all the utilities on for that appraisal appointment, okay? Any questions about that? Okay. So title, you want to make, you as the agent, you also want to make sure that all the title stuff is being done and processed in a timely fashion, and help resolve any issues that they might have. So the best thing to do is, as soon as you have that executed contract, give it to the closing team, right? Not 2 days later, not 3 days later, like immediately give the closing team your contract, all right? So that they know and they can start working on it. You want to make sure title company is going to need information from both your buyer and your seller. Make sure that you're helping them get that information, okay? Make sure that if any issues, if the lien search shows any issues, the estoppel shows any issues, make sure that you are, assisting your buyer or your seller in those cases, resolve those issues. Make sure that, the title company, especially when you get closer to closing, that the title company and the lender are in communication, and they're balancing, and, they're getting things ready for closing. Assist with helping with the, making sure that the, CD or the settlement statement is sent to you guys to review, preferably even before your clients, to make sure that the credits that were agreed upon during inspection are on there. Make sure that the commissions are on there, are correct. And then make sure that the buyer receives the final cash to close and the wire instructions from the title company, the closing team, all right? You also want to make sure, if you want to get paid, that that the closing team has a copy of your commission disbursement authorization. All right. Any questions on title? It's good to stay in contact with your title processor, though, to make sure that all of these title reports have been, are being ordered and being received and reviewed. Okay. All right, so we've gotten through all of these hurdles, and we are getting ready to close. Okay, as a listing agent, again, for final walkthrough, it is their responsibility to make sure that the utilities are okay. So as a listing agent, I would always encourage your sellers to schedule utilities to be shut off the day after closing. You want to make sure that you know, you've talked about like how, you know, gathering up all of the keys. You want to make sure that they've taken all those keys off of their key ring and out of their purses and out of their cars, or, you know, any hidden spaces, gotten them from neighbors. Now, it's really wise for the buyer to redo the keys and stuff, but sometimes they don't. And it's still contractually the seller's responsibility to ensure that the buyer is given all entry access items. You want to help coordinate signing, like a signing time for your seller, and I would highly recommend that you attend your signings and for your buyers and your sellers. Being there at closing with them is a very good, it's a good time. It's typically a very happy time, and so it's, you know, it's good to be there with them. I would also recommend giving some kind of closing gift that would be something that kind of keeps you in the, as their agent, in the forefront of their mind, and something that like they would see and see your face and your name, you know, over and over again and over time, so that they remember how awesome of an agent you are, so that they remember to use you in the future, and that they remember to refer you to their friends. So with the for the buyer's agent, with closing, again, you want to make sure that you're, you know, scheduling your final walkthrough with your client. You want to make sure that you're helping the closing team, you know, schedule a time for your buyers to sign. You want to make sure that you're communicating with your buyers that they don't want to wait until 3-4 p.m. to start their signing, because you want to ensure that funding happens same day, and wire cutoff time, remember, our bank hours. So once 5 o'clock hits, and sometimes even earlier, depending on the bank, funding can't take place. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're attending closing with your buyers. Buyers are closing in enough time, or signing in enough time to make the funding happen. And also you want to make sure that you're giving your buyer a little closing gift as well, for the same reason as a listing agent. After closing, it is always a fantastic idea, especially like within the first 24 hours, to send out a wonderful congratulations email. Ask your clients to give you a referral, to post a referral. Ask your agents to, you know, for someone, a friend to, you know, that they might know that you could possibly help list their home or find a home for them. Typically referrals and good reviews are given, you know, they're more apt to give like right after closing. So, or again, you can hire someone like me or Natalie or Anna to do this kind of stuff for you. Now, we can't attend your appointments for you though. You got to be the face. Does anybody have any questions? I know I kind of sped up through there at the end because I kind of lost track of time. No questions? Oh, yes, that's right. That was a question that I said. So our fee is, it's a flat fee, $3.95 per file. It's due at closing. If the file for some reason doesn't make it all the way to closing, we don't get paid, just like the agents don't get paid. So we have a vested interest to make sure that your transactions come to a successful closing as well. But for location agents, what's really, really cool is if you use the closing, you know, if the closing team is the closing agent, the closing team will incorporate our fee into the settlement fee, and then pay us after closing. So you actually, as the agent, get our administrative assistance, and for no cost from the agent. I believe that the with the closing team, the settlement fee is $7.95 if you like to use the transaction coordinating service. Any other questions? Is there? Is the settlement fee to the buyer or seller from the closing team?
So in other words, if we use them, they'll incorporate it. So if it's 1,000 something, it's coming out of the buyer.
Okay. Well, it wouldn't ever be 1,000 something. It would be $7.95 is the settlement fee, and so yes, the fee is passed on to.
And
Yeah.
it has a transaction coordinator. You do everything. You're gonna call the appraisal. You're gonna call the inspector. You're gonna do addendum. You're gonna do everything.
Yes, well, we don't call the appraiser, but we will accept the appraiser's call and help schedule that once it's ordered. Yes.
Okay,
So
yeah,
yes.
the person,
So
but
when
in charge for all the documents.
yes. So the question is.
If you is the executive addendum, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, the executive contract, and you do everything.
Yes, to an extent. Yeah, we do all of the administrative stuff, all of your paperwork. We schedule all of the appointments when it comes to negotiations. Like from the inspection report, we can help you as the agent kind of advise a little bit, but it is the agent's responsibility to do the actual negotiations. But as far as the addendum, then yes, we also don't attend appointments, so don't go open doors and stuff like that. But all your paperwork, all your scheduling,
Yeah, we do
all
the
of your.
lease contract,
Mhm.
and that's it. Regarding the documents, starting in that moment, you will be in charge for everything.